I had promised myself I would not cry at work. Not today. Not ever again. But there I was, back pressed hard against the cold steel fridge in Mr. Kang's kitchen, shoulders shaking, trying to swallow the sound coming up my throat. The other staff had just walked out laughing. Mrs. Cho had knocked my bucket of clean water onto the floor on purpose, right in front of everyone, and smiled while she did it. "Clumsy girl," she had said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "Maybe that's why no one wanted you before this." They had all laughed, every single one of them. I slid down the fridge a little, pressing my palms against my eyes. My uniform was soaked at the knees from the spilled water. My hands would not stop trembling. I had worked at this estate for 4 months, kept my head down, done everything right, and still, it was never enough for her. Then I heard it, a soft click, the door lock sliding into place. My breath froze in my chest. Slow footsteps crossed the kitchen. I lifted my face just enough to see a pair of polished black shoes stop 2 feet in front of me. I knew those shoes. Everyone in this house knew those shoes. Mr. Kang, the man the whole city feared, crouched down until his eyes were level with mine. He lifted my chin with 2 fingers. His voice was low, barely above a whisper. "Who made you cry?" My heart dropped straight to the floor, not from fear alone, but because I already knew telling him the truth was going to make everything so much worse. I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. I slipped," I said. "On the wet floor. It's nothing, sir. I'm fine." The lie came out small and thin, like paper in the wind. Even I did not believe it. His expression did not change at first. Then something shifted behind his eyes, a coldness that crept in slow, the way winter moves into a room when a window opens. He stood up to his full height and looked down at me. "I don't repeat myself," he said quietly. I felt my stomach twist. A memory flashed behind my eyes. Mrs. Cho's face 3 weeks ago, close to mine in the laundry room, voice dropped to a hiss. "Say one word to him, and I will make sure you lose everything. And I mean everything." She had smiled after that, like she was describing the weather. I had believed her then. I still believed her now. "I'm sorry," I said again. "It was just an accident." Mr. Kang studied me for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He dialed without looking away from me and put it on speaker. 1 ring. 2. Then a voice answered. "Sir?" "Bring everyone back to the kitchen," Mr. Kang said. "All of them. Right now." The call ended. The kitchen went completely silent, except for the rain tapping against the windows. I pressed my back into the fridge. This was exactly what I had been afraid of. They came back in slowly. 5 of them, confused, still holding mops and folded linens. Mrs. Cho walked in last, smoothing the front of her uniform. She scanned the room, saw me against the fridge, and I watched her relax. She thought she was safe. I could see it in the way her shoulders dropped, the tiny pull at the corner of her mouth. Mr. Kang stood in the center of the kitchen. He did not say a word. He just looked at each of them. One by one, the way someone reads a map. Then he turned back to me. "Point," he said simply. My hands began to shake so hard I had to press them against my thighs. This was my moment. 4 months of swallowed tears, of ruined work, of words that left bruises on the inside. All of it could end right now. I raised my finger. But Mrs. Cho caught my eye just for half a second. Her gaze dropped to something in her hand, a folded piece of paper, and then back to me. A quiet warning. "I have what I need to destroy you." My hand moved. I pointed at Song Yi, the youngest kitchen worker, the girl who had nothing to do with any of it. Gasps filled the room. Song Yi's face went white. "Me?" Her voice cracked. I never." Mr. Kang raised one hand and the room went silent. He looked at Song Yi with no expression at all and said 2 words to the guard by the door. The guard stepped forward. Song Yi started crying, shaking her head, stumbling backward. I watched them take her out. My throat was burning. My eyes were stinging so badly I had to look at the floor. What had I just done? Song Yi had once left a warm bread roll outside my room door on a night when I had skipped dinner. She was the only one here who had ever been kind to me, and I had just destroyed her because I was a coward. The rest of the staff were dismissed. I stood alone, staring at the tile. Then I felt it, a light brush of fabric against my arm as Mrs. Cho passed me on her way out. I looked up. She was smiling. Not big, just at the corners of her mouth. She mouthed 2 words without making a sound. "Good girl." And I understood then, fully and completely, that I was not just being bullied. I was being used. That night, I was walking back to my room when a hand shot out from a side hallway and pulled me into the shadow. I bit down on a scream. Mrs. Cho stood in front of me, arms folded, the warmth completely gone from her face. "You did well today," she said, "but I want to make sure you understand your situation." She leaned in close. "This job, it was never yours. You were placed here, guided here. Do you understand what that means?" I stared at her. "What are you talking about?" "There is something in your past," she said softly, "that you don't fully remember. A night years ago, when you were very small. Something happened and people have been watching you because of it ever since." She paused, including me. A strange coldness moved through my chest. I had no idea what she meant. My childhood memories before the age of 9 were blurry and broken. A fire, shouting, someone's hands gripping mine. "You're lying," I whispered. "Am I?" She tilted her head. "Then why are you trembling?" She walked away without another word, leaving me alone in the dark hallway with a fear that had no name yet. What I did not know that night was that I was not alone in the hallway. Not really. In the security room 2 floors above me, Mr. Kang sat in front of a wall of monitors. He rewound the footage from the kitchen, watched it once, then again. He watched Mrs. Cho's micro-expression when I walked in that morning. He watched the way I flinched every time she passed behind me. He watched the exact moment I changed my point from her to Song-yi, the way my eyes cut to her hand first. He pressed pause, leaned forward. He rewound further, to 3 weeks ago, to the laundry room. The camera angle was bad, but he could see Mrs. Cho standing too close to me, and he could read enough from my body language to understand what kind of conversation it had been. He played it forward again, stopped on my face. Then he noticed something that made him completely still. 2 days ago during a supply delivery, one of the drivers had called out a name while unloading boxes. A name that had nothing to do with me or the delivery. A name I should not have recognized, but I had turned around, just for a second. Instinct. Then I had caught myself and looked away. Mr. Kang stared at the frozen frame and said quietly to the empty room, "Interesting." He called me to his study the next evening. I stood in front of his desk, hands clasped, waiting for punishment. The room smelled like old books and cedar. He sat behind the desk and looked at me the way he had looked at the monitors, like he was reading something written in small print. "Sit down," he said. I sat. He placed a photograph on the desk and slid it toward me. It was grainy, old, taken at night. 2 figures on a street. A tall man, a stranger, and a small child standing beside him. "Do you know this man?" he asked. I looked at the photo. My mouth went dry. The child in the picture, the small girl with braided hair in an oversized coat, looked exactly like photos I had seen of myself at that age. "No," I said automatically. Then the man's face in the photo seemed to blur and shift in my memory, and something cracked open in my chest. A scream far away, someone pushing me behind a dumpster, a voice saying, "Stay down, don't move." The room tilted. I grabbed the edge of the desk, but it was too late. The darkness rushed in from the edges of my vision, and I felt myself falling before I could say another word. When I woke up, Mr. Kang was crouched beside my chair. He was not calling for help. He was just watching me, very carefully. "You know him," he said quietly, "even if you don't know that you do." Over the next 2 days, I learned the truth in pieces. Mr. Kang did not tell me all of it at once. He told it to me slowly, like someone unwrapping something fragile. The man in the photograph was my father, Park Jun-ho. He had died when I was 8 years old. What I had never known was how. 12 years ago, Mr. Kang, then 24, newly risen and carrying too many enemies, had been ambushed in an alley 3 blocks from the Han River. He had been outnumbered and losing badly when a man stepped out of a doorway and blocked the last attacker long enough for Mr. Kang to get clear. The man was shot for it. That man was my father. My father had saved Mr. Kang's life, and then I had been placed in the city system, bounced between care homes, and eventually had ended up here in this house without ever knowing why. "Someone guided you here," Mr. Kang said, his voice controlled and flat. "I thought it was coincidence. It wasn't." "Who?" I asked. He set down his pen. "Someone who knew your connection to me before either of us did. Someone who wanted to use it." My blood went cold. Mrs. Cho had known. She had known all along. Mrs. Cho was not just a housekeeper. I understood that now. She had been placed in this estate 3 years before me by a rival faction, a group working against Mr. Kang from the inside. Her job was quiet and slow. Learn the household, earn trust, find weaknesses. And then, when they discovered my father's history, they found the perfect weapon. Not a gun. Not money. Me. If they could control me, a girl connected to a debt Mr. Kang did not know he owed, they could use that connection to destabilize him, manipulate him, feed false information through someone he might eventually trust. But first, they needed me broken, isolated, too afraid to think clearly. That was what the months of bullying had been. It was not cruelty for the sake of cruelty. It was preparation. And now Mr. Kang told me quietly, Mrs. Cho had moved to the final stage. That evening, there was going to be a gathering, senior staff and several business associates, and she was planning to accuse me publicly of passing information to his enemies. She had planted false evidence, documents with my fingerprints, a phone log with calls I had never made. She's going to call me a traitor, I whispered. Yes, Mr. Kang said. What are we going to do? He looked at me with an expression I could not fully read. We're going to let her. The gathering was held in the main hall that evening. I stood near the back wall, still in my uniform, watching the room fill with faces I did not know. My palms were sweating. Mr. Kang stood near the front, speaking quietly with 2 associates. He had not looked at me since we entered. Then Mrs. Cho stepped forward. She spoke clearly, calmly, with the confidence of someone who had rehearsed every word. She described how she had noticed strange behavior from me over the past months. She presented the documents, printed pages in a clear folder passed around the room. She showed the phone log on a tablet. She told them I had been feeding information about Mr. Kang's schedule and shipments to an outside source. The room shifted. I could feel it, the way people leaned toward her words and away from me. I looked at Mr. Kang. He was standing very still, watching Mrs. Cho speak. He did not defend me. He did not even look at me. And for one terrible moment, a thought slipped in. What if he actually believes her? The doubt hit me like cold water. Everything I thought I understood, the conversations, his explanations, the look in his eyes when he talked about my father, suddenly felt thin and fragile. My throat tightened. The room was spinning slowly. Maybe I had been wrong about all of it. I broke. Not loudly. It started with my hands shaking at my sides, and then the tears came whether I wanted them to or not, burning hot tracks down my face. And then, because I had swallowed too much for too long, because I was so tired, because somewhere underneath all the fear I was furious, I spoke. Stop. My voice came out louder than I expected. The room went quiet. Everyone turned to look at me. I was trembling, but I did not stop. I told them everything. I told them about the laundry room and the threat. I told them about Song Yi, about being forced to point at the wrong person, about the water bucket and the laughing. I told them about the hallway conversation and what Mrs. Cho had said about my past. I told them I had been lied to, manipulated, and used, and that the documents were planted because I had never once passed anything to anyone. By the time I finished, my voice was shaking. The hall was completely silent. Then Mr. Kang spoke from the front of the room. I was waiting, he said slowly, for you to say exactly that. Everything happened quickly after that. Mr. Kang stepped forward and addressed the room directly. He explained that he had been aware of the manipulation since the night of the kitchen incident. He had spent the following days building a full picture, reviewing footage tracing the documents Mrs. Cho had planted back to their source and confirming her connection to the rival faction through 2 separate informants. The evidence he presented was quiet and absolute. The phone log she had shown was edited. He had the original. The documents had been printed from a device registered to her personal network, not mine. The outside source she claimed I was feeding information to was, in fact, a contact she had been communicating with for 3 years. The room shifted again. This time it shifted away from her. Mrs. Cho's expression did not crack immediately. She was too controlled for that. But I watched the certainty drain from her eyes the way water drains from a glass with a hole in it, slow then all at once. She looked around the room and found no one meeting her gaze. Then she lifted her chin and laughed, short, sharp, like a blade striking stone. "You think that's everything?" she said. I still have something left. Mrs. Cho reached into the inside pocket of her jacket and pulled out a folded document. She held it up so the room could see it. This girl's father, she said, her voice steady and cold, was not the hero Mr. Kang wants to believe he was. Park Joon-ho was under investigation the night he died, suspected of moving stolen goods for a street-level criminal ring. His death was not heroic. It was a consequence. She turned to me directly, and you were there. A child of 8, a witness. The report was sealed, but I have a copy. It names you as a person of interest. The room was silent. My legs felt like they were made of paper. A person of interest. Me, at 8 years old, in the middle of something I had never understood. My broken childhood memories rearranged themselves into something sharp and awful. The fire, the shouting, my father's hands pushing me away from him. Mrs. Cho smiled for the first time all evening. Doesn't feel so clean now, does it? Then Mr. Kang said very calmly, You mean this? He was holding up his own document. He had gotten there before her. The full investigation report, the original unsealed, had been retrieved 2 days ago through a contact inside the government records office. Mr. Kang had read it before tonight. He had been ready. He read the relevant section aloud. My father had not been moving stolen goods. He had been working as an informal informant, cooperating with authorities to identify the criminal ring from the inside. He had not been named a suspect. He had been given temporary protection status. And I, 8-year-old me, found hiding behind a dumpster 3 streets from the incident, had not been a person of interest. I had been recorded as a child witness kept out of the official report for my own safety. The sealed document had been twisted. Someone had taken the real facts and bent them just enough to look like guilt, enough to hold over my head, enough to keep me afraid of the truth I had never been allowed to know. My father was not a criminal. He had been brave, and they had spent years making me afraid of his memory. The room turned completely. Mr. Kang lowered the document and looked at Mrs. Cho with an expression that had no anger in it, only a cold, absolute finality. That was somehow more frightening than fury. He said 2 words to the guards at the door. They removed Mrs. Cho without drama. No shouting, no struggle. She walked out straight-backed, guards on either side, and the doors closed behind her. The hall was very quiet. The associates began to leave one by one, speaking in low voices. The remaining staff kept their eyes down. Song-yi, who had been brought back that morning, cleared and shaken, stood near the doorway and gave me the smallest nod I had ever seen. I nodded back, and something tight in my chest loosened just a little. I was still standing in the same spot when Mr. Kang crossed the room and stopped in front of me. He looked at me differently now. Not the way an employer looks at a maid, not even the way a powerful man looks at someone he pities. He looked at me like someone who understood exactly what it had cost me to stand in that room and speak. Your father kept me alive, he said quietly. I never knew where to direct that debt. Now I do. I did not know what to say. My eyes were burning again, but this time not from pain. You're done being afraid here, he said. That's done. I believed him. I walked back through the long corridor toward my room, and for the first time in 4 months, I was not watching my back. The house felt different, quieter. Mine, somehow, in a way it had never been before. But at the door to my room, I paused. Mrs. Cho had said I was guided here, that my connection to Mr. Kang had been discovered and used. But by whom, originally? Who had first found my father's file, traced it to me, and decided I was worth controlling? Someone above Mrs. Cho had set this in motion, and that person was still out there. I pressed my hand against the door frame and stood very still. This was not the end of my story. It was only the beginning.